Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of your Thomas recruitment journey. Just some house rules for today's session before we begin. Please remember to keep yourself on mute during the session. I will be managing the chat box, so please feel free to pop in any questions or comments that you may have during and after the presentation, as we will have a Q&A segment at the end. We will also be sending you a link to a survey after the webinar, which we would really appreciate if you could complete to help us improve the content that we provide you. I have the pleasure today of introducing your presenter for the session, Kira van die Kerk. Kira is a client development consultant at Thomas International South Africa. Kira is a registered psychometrist who has a passion for people excellence and the promotion of self-awareness at the individual, team, and organizational level. She has experience facilitating team workshops and awareness sessions with a focus on positive psychology and personal effectiveness. Kira has worked with a variety of clients in different industries and has experience in the industrial, clinical, and medical legal fields. She is also a certified mindfulness life coach. And now, without further ado, I hand you over to Kira.
Awesome. Thank you, Larissa. What a lovely introduction. Thank you. So welcome everybody today to the third installment of our webinar series on the recruitment journey, the recruitment and onboarding case study. So our focus today is to make it really nice and practical, give you guys a good insight to see how we actually use these assessments and these concepts we've been talking about so far. So first off, I'm going to do a little bit of a brief recap on really talking about the recruitment and onboarding process and why it is important. This is something that we need to keep in mind as we go through today because this is the foundation of what we're discussing. Interestingly, 51% of businesses report product errors caused by hiring the wrong person, and 24% of businesses experienced a loss of customers because of that. 95% of organizations say a poor hiring decision impacted the morale of their team, and 60% have had a bad hire, not get along with the co-workers. Now, these are just two elements, but it shows you not even just on a bottom line level, but for your people as well. There's a big impact if we don't pay enough attention to the recruitment process, if we don't pay enough attention to the onboarding process as well. And that's what we're trying to assist you guys with here today. The recruitment and onboarding process at Thomas, we've identified for the following 5 stages for the best practice there. We've talked a lot about this. I'm sure if you have been in the other webinars that this is familiar, but the process that Thomas recommends is first off, we need to clearly define the vacant role. That's the first step. The second step is about candidate attraction. How do we get the right candidates to apply for the role in the first place? We also look at assessments and selection to see how can we get more data-driven scientific methods rather than just that face value interview that we've used to be doing. And then also appointing the right person quickly. So once you've gone through the assessment and selection process, how do we make sure we appoint that person before they move on somewhere else? Then lastly, once we've appointed the person, it doesn't just stop there. We need to focus on how do we induct this individual into the role, into the team, as well as the culture. Okay, so these are the 5 steps that we're going to focus on. Now today we're going to make it very practical by focusing specifically on a certain position. So the position we're going to focus on is the Senior Officer Learning Designer and take a case study there. So I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce Natasha Null from the University of the Free State. She is an organizational and development specialist and an industrial psychologist. She has allowed us to discuss this position that the UFS has recruited for using our Thomas tools. So Natasha, thank you so much for letting us discuss this position. Could you please explain to us at the UFS, how do assessments form part of your recruitment strategy?
Okay, good afternoon and thank you for this opportunity. So the assessments are used throughout the employee cycle within the university, but specifically with regards to recruitment, we use it to assess all of the shortlisted candidates for a specific position. We will not use assessments in isolation, but rather use it with the data that we gather during the interviews, the CVs, and the references. So usually we assess the candidates and we give feedback to the interview panel after the last candidate. And at the moment, like I've mentioned, we use it with the other data, but we are moving towards, together with Thomas International, towards weighting, putting a weight towards the assessments that we use, the references that we do, and the interviews. So that's currently how it is used with regards to our recruitment.
Awesome, Natasha. Thank you so much for that. And it's really awesome to have one of our really valued clients here with us today, so we can actually talk about how we work in partnership with clients to help support them through this recruitment journey. So thanks so much, Natasha. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
As we go through, Natasha is going to give some really cool insights as we go along, and I'll ask her some questions. So you're going to be hearing from a bit of both of us today. So based on that model that we looked at with the 5 different steps, the first step is really about clearly defining the vacant role. Now, this sounds very self-explanatory, but it's actually something that can be the first step where people tend to miss out on an opportunity with their potential candidates. So getting this first stage of the process right is extremely important. So clearly defining the vacant role will lead to more suitable applicants, more objective decision-making, and longer-term hires. So we need to look at specific requirements that are going to be in that job description. So your job description should include these specific requirements that look at attributes, qualifications, and experience, which you can then measure during the recruitment process. The job description should also focus on the responsibilities of the role and demonstrate how does the role align with company strategy. And then the person specification is where we really tap into those attributes and skills and qualifications as well as experiences. So we need to specify the role, but also specify what we're specifically looking for there as well. This ensures that recruitment decisions are objective. So again, using scientific research, using data to give us those objective decisions, rather than just focusing on, well, I think this person has this attribute because of how they came across in an interview. Get the tools, get the actual knowledge to find out, is this actually what we're seeing with this candidate? So Natasha, when you do define a role at UFS, do you use the PPA in part of job profiling when you do define a specific role?
Okay, so just to give you some background, we started using assessment and Thomas International specifically from 2015. So that's actually when we started using assessments as part of our recruitment strategy. So we have a competency framework at the university with 5 specific broad competencies and dimensions underneath it. So when we do make use of the job profiling, at the moment it's more paper-based, so we would rather communicate that with the department head before we do the assessments. But for the higher up positions, like for example our director positions, we do use the job profiling system and then we do it via the questionnaire. For the lower positions, let's say for example if we recruit for a UFS recruitment, a recruiter where they need to recruit students, we will make use of our job profile and our competency framework and use that as a background when we, for say, give feedback to our interview panel. So if, for example, this person really needs to go and sell the university, they need to recruit students, then we would rather use at the moment our own training in our Thomas products to advise the department to say this person, for example, demonstrates this behavioral preferences and would be, for example, a good fit based on their job profile. So a little bit more paper-based at this moment, but we are moving towards the job profiling. And something nice that we're also busy with Thomas International is actually getting all of that data to say that for this position within the university, this would be the best job profile or behavioral profile for this type of position. So exciting things that are coming with this job profiling with Thomas.
Awesome. Thank you, Natasha. So this shows you how even just using the PPA knowledge can already help you start defining these aspects that can be in a job description, and really ties on quite well there. And what we can already see with what the job description that we received from the UFS on this position is they already started using some of those insights as well. So the role is the Senior Officer Learning Designer. In the job description, the UFS did an amazing job at clearly defining what we needed here. So the duties and responsibilities included these following 5 big key aspects, but they had lots of information underneath as well to allow the candidate to really see if this is what they can suit. So I looked at curriculum and learning design, client relations, so also looking at how do we liaise with different clients, how do we coordinate and how do we communicate, training and development, people management, supervision, and research. And what was really great is even under the people management supervision section, it was super specific. So it really talked to how many people is this person going to supervise, in what way are they going to supervise them. And again, having this clear definition really helps with the other steps of the process, like candidate attraction. They also mentioned the required competencies, which works quite well with the competency framework that they have set up. And this is just a few of them, but some of the key ones that we will tie through with this case study today. So some of the required competencies were good interpersonal communication skills, intermediate skills in MS Office and Blackboard or Moodle, which are student interaction sort of software, ability to work in a team and alone, which is very important, not just a team focus, but also working independently, and the ability to work well under pressure and accurately. So these key aspects were included in the job profile, which again allows you as not just the recruiter, but also as the candidate to really see how do I fit here, and as the recruiter to really be able to tap into what are we assessing here. And that's really important as well. So if you do use the PPA for job profiling, this is the whole principle. So job profiling is designed to identify the behavioral requirements of a job function using the DISC theory as part of the PPA, which we'll briefly touch on later. So this is stipulating from a behavioral point of view, what's really required for this role. As we are aware, establishing the specifications of a job is a critical component of any recruitment and selection process. But once we've set the requirements or what's required for a specific role, we're then able to market that role. So we're able to attract the applicants according to our requirements, like I've mentioned previously. And then if you use the behavioral profile, it gives them another added dimension in terms of what are we behaviorally looking for from that candidate. And it gives people something more to latch onto when they're looking at applying for the role as well. So here we can see you've got the job profile in the square and the PPA behavior in the circle. What we really want is to have the best person job fit. So we're not looking to force someone into position or to be a certain type of person, but rather making sure that we are using them in the best way possible in our organization. So we want to make sure that there's the best fit possible. If there are some elements that don't fit so well on the side of the candidate, you can get some unused resources. So the candidate may feel, I've got all these skills that I can't really contribute. I can't really bring my self-starting ability or my people skills or my policy skills because that's not what the job was requiring. On the side of the job or in your organization, there may be some requirements that might not be met of the job because there's not that overlap. If we get a better fit, we get greater efficiency for the organization and increased job satisfaction for the individual as well. This will help you retain your employees for longer. Then based on this person job fit, based on the PPA profile and what we've already worked on with the job profile, then we get a 1 to 5 star rating match. This allows us to see how similar are the profiles? What are the implications of the differences? How different is it really? And this 5-star match, along with the full report, gives you that information as well. So in our first session, Larissa awesomely made us a job profile on this position already. So we've got something great to start with here. So the job profile that we created had a strong focus on the following. So for a senior officer learning designer, they wanted a perfectionist approach to situations and someone that enjoys researching facts and information. So not just about the facts, but we also wanted someone capable of communicating those facts as well. So having that technical expertise, that analytical manner. We also needed that achievement of results and they need to be involved in a variety of tasks to be able to juggle the many components of this position. but still keeping accuracy and attention to detail as really important aspects of the job. Standard operating procedures, adherence to rules and systems, as well as the ability to maintain quality and standards were also important. Then some of the consistent characteristics we're looking for are things like conventional, consistent, adaptable, someone that's precise and careful, but they can still be active and alert. They're going to keep themselves going with that self-starting ability and being inquisitive as well as friendly and confident, all within a specific area of expertise. So you can already see if you're reading a job profile, if you're reading a job advert that has this section in it, you can start thinking, oh, well, I'm someone that likes to interact with a lot of people, but I like to talk about technical things. You're able to pick up on these specific keywords as well that allows the candidate to feel connected with the role from the get-go. And then lastly, if the best results are to be achieved from this position, a clear description of the requirements will be essential to the job holder. This is really useful information as well. Whether you put this in the job adverts or not, that's up to you. But already for you as a company or as an organization, you can see, I need to be clear when I describe things to this individual as they come in. Or it's already giving you some insights into the onboarding process that we're going to look a bit more in depth into later. So it gives you lots of information that you can start working with already by having this job profile ready for you. So this is just to get to the point where you're now going to advertise the role. Now we need to look at how do we make sure we're attracting the right candidates? How do we really put a lot of effort into that? It's something that people feel, well, obviously people are going to apply to your role, but we want to attract the right kind of candidates. And there's reasons why we need to focus on that. So there's 6 reasons to reinvent your recruitment strategy around candidate attraction. So the first off there we can see is candidate control. The modern candidate is in a position of power. So there's a global shortage of talent, which means most candidates can dictate the kind of career they want to have more readily. It means most people are now going to have a more varied or transient career than generations before. So rather than stay with a single organization for many years, today's workers spend time building a portfolio of experience, which means more career changes over shorter periods of time. In some ways, this can make an employee more attractive. They probably are perceived as being more adaptable or self-motivated because they will jump between sectors and aren't afraid to take those risks. But it also means if they are high performing, we have to put more effort into making sure we retain them. That's something we need to keep in mind. Then if we look at social media connectivity, technological changes made both employers and potential hires more accessible to each other. So active networking and social media means that information is more readily available. It can affect the way you recruit and the way that you promote your workplace. People might be finding you through social media, through LinkedIn, rather than a standard platform. So this can be very important as well to see how I'm advertising this position. Am I making it attractive? Getting people that are like-minded to be part of your brand or part of your organizational culture. Then candidate attraction. So that's what we're focusing on here. And this is really not just about the initial interaction though. Candidate attraction is about forming a successful relationship with your candidates from the get-go. The way you take them through the recruitment journey is going to influence how they are attached to your organization once they get the job. Then there's the psychological contract. So this has been an emerging subject across HR for many years. It's a term used to describe everything not covered by an official employment contract. It's the unwritten relationship between an employer and its employees. And this can be things like unspoken expectations, values, other aspects that become quite important. And here we need to look at how do we manage the expectations and make sure that both parties honor the deal. And this is through that psychological contract. And again, the way you start the person off in your organization with onboarding as well can lead to different aspects of the psychological contract not being fulfilled. Then we look at diversity and equality, and this is a big one. Workforce demographics are currently undergoing a huge period of change, which is needed. We want more differences in our workplace because that allows us to get to better solutions and have a bit more of an engaging, adaptable organization with these different aspects. What's very interesting is one part of the population tends to apply for roles even if they don't really meet all the requirements. And one part of the population will avoid applying for a role if they don't meet the requirements. Very interestingly, this divide is based on gender. So research has shown us that the male part of the population, so men, are more likely to apply for a role even if they don't meet the requirements. but women tend to not apply for roles that they don't meet the requirements for. Now, this is a huge implication. If you're not clearly defining the role, if you're not giving enough attention to making sure that it's easily digestible what's required of the role as well, this means that you might be losing out on a large part of the population that won't apply because there's not enough information for them to go on. So it's a very interesting thing to keep in mind. And then lastly, millennials. So one of the biggest demographic changes in the workplace has been the introduction of millennials. So you're going to have many more people coming into your organization that have this technological mindset as well. So having grown up with Wi-Fi, smartphones, tablets, and social media, they have a very digitally minded expectation of the recruitment process as well. The way that you advertise your post is going to immediately set the tone as well. So if they feel that, okay, there isn't even online applications, it's all paper, I have to come into the office, they might start already thinking, okay, but is this an organization for me? One way to get it going, it will get the whole process going in a very positive manner, is candidate feedback reports. So it's a way to stand apart from the competition by showing care for your people from the start of the recruitment process. So if I apply for a position and I get my candidate feedback report, which does not need any feedback with it, there's no raw scores. If I get that report, I'm immediately seeing that this organization cares even before I'm a successful candidate. And this can be extremely useful to get people on board and get them to accept your offer as well. What we saw took place at UFS was in the description of the job description, there were some key aspects that they really tailored to as well. So it included a clear description of the role with enough detail. Remember, our job profile said that the person that's going to come into this role needs that detail, needs to know what those requirements of the job are, and they really provided that. They also provided the details of the possible benefits in their job advert. This is very important. It makes it a bit more of an attractive post as well. If I know what else is in it for me, it can add to the millennial focus, and it can add to as well the wanting to know what's a psychological contract, what extra might I be getting here. There was an online application process as well. Again, keeping it a bit more current, not having to post something or having to drop something off. There was a contact person that was made available for any queries, and it was very clearly stated. This also makes candidates feel like there's more care being put in. I know that there's someone that I can ask if there's anything that I need, and they were very positive in the way they phrased that. And then lastly, there were also clear details surrounding the feedback of the results of the process. So also they clearly explained, when will you hear from us? What's the time period? What does it mean? And that's also very important, something a lot of organizations tend to neglect. But again, if someone isn't successful, they're going to tell that to other people that they know that they didn't hear from you, and that might impact who you attract down the line as well. Okay, so that's candidate attraction. Now we're going to move on to assessment and selection, which is where Thomas really comes in to help assist you. So did you know that past job experience only predicts 16% of job performance? On the other hand, psychometric assessments such as personality and general intelligence predict 31 to 65% of job performance. This is a massive statistic to keep in mind. We cannot just go on what someone's CV says. We have to look at what else is there. So this was a study, and this research found these results by conducting a meta-analysis of data spanning 100 years with 19 different selection procedures. There's a lot of research that went into finding this out. And then we know assessments do really make a big impact, because it gives you that extra data to give you those properly data-driven decisions as well. So why should we use multiple methods? So here we can see the empty jelly man. So this is part of the Thomas logo. So when you get a candidate that applies for the role, we often see the first layer, the CV and experience. That's what we get given, and that's just the first initial application. Then they might mention something about their knowledge and skills. We might not know for sure if they might have a certificate or two, but they do mention some of the knowledge and skills that they have. But there's so much that's still left unsaid, and this is where assessments come in. So first off, we can assess the behavior. So not just behavior based on, in the interview session, this is how the person came across. People can be coached on how to interview, or people might get such bad nerves that they might not come across effectively in an interview as well. So having the behavioral assessments allows you to tap into how they're going to come across in the workplace, what's going to motivate them, what are going to be their strengths, what might be their limitations based on the role. So that will give you the surface level, but there are some things beneath the surface that we don't really know about an individual unless we assess. That includes aptitude and ability, that general intelligence element that's really a high predictor of success in a role. And then also the personality element, the HPTI, which we'll take you through. So all these different elements interact with each other to give you a full picture of an individual. And that's why we use multiple methods, so that you have all that information, can make the best decision possible for your organization, using the data, using the scientific basis. So a possible recruitment pathway, and this is not to say this is the key pathway or this is the only pathway that you can use, but this is a possible recruitment pathway. If we look at the senior officer learning designer, then we look at the CV screening. Now that happens through the organization. Then we can look at some of the other things that we can do in that first stage, the assessment-based pre-qualification and shortlisting stage. So we can do a skills assessment. Do they really have the skills that they say they do? We can do behavior fit assessment with the PPA and the fluid intelligence assessment with the GIA. And I'll take you through that in more detail. Then in the second stage, we've got the first interviews that are informed by that assessment insight. So here we can add, have those questions that are based on some of the questions that you already get in the reports. So the reports will give you some really nice guidelines on what to use in an interview. Then we can use a personality assessment to dig a little bit deeper. Maybe you want to see, how do we develop this individual? What are the untapped elements that we could be using? Then the last stage, stage 3, is the final interviews that are informed by that deeper personality insight. And then we have the final interview and either offer or regret. Okay, so this is one pathway that we can take as well. So with that first step, with CV and prior experience, this is done through screening candidates based on basic requirements listed in the job description. This is how you sift through, do they meet the requirements educationally, things like that. That happens with the organization. Then we get to knowledge and skills, and this can be sometimes quite difficult to really assess. How do I make sure that they actually can use MS Office, for example, or how do they really come across when they do customer service, things like that. So there we have the eSkills platform. So with the eSkills platform, you can choose from over 600 standard tests and 5,000 combinable topics. We look at things like numerical reasoning, verbal, writing, project management, data checking, and many more. Then we also have job simulations. So we can then have a digital literacy simulation, a MS Office simulation, looking at even things like Outlook, not just Excel or Word. Then we also have multitasking or a chat simulation. So here we can really see what does it actually look like. So can they actually find the aspects of the different programs, for example, click on them. And we can integrate all these multiple skills into one test. So then you can assess customer service, MS Office, multitasking, and verbal reasoning, all in one skills assessment with one link. And that's a really useful skill there. So with the eSkills platform, you can tap into that knowledge and skills and get a bit more insight. Does it really exist? Is that what we're looking for here? Do they have the level, or do we need to train them as part of the onboarding as well? Then we get to the behavior level. And this is where the PPA comes in. So now we've looked at the CV and prior experience. We've now looked at what the skills look like. Now, what does the behavior look like? How are they going to come across to other people in their team? Just a very brief overview of the DISC, as we have mentioned a lot in the previous sessions as well. The DISC theory looks at the way that we behave in our work environment. And the DISC is the 4 different factors that we look at: dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. So if individuals have a focus of dominance in their profile, they're likely to focus on driving results. They have a focus on power as well to guide the way that they drive those results. If that is not a focus of someone's profile, they may rather seek direction. There may be someone that will hold back until they're sure of the consequences of their decisions. If someone has a strong influence focus, they tend to like focusing on relationships. They want to build new relationships, work with people, very much the individuals that like to go and network and motivate with people. If that's not their focus, they may seek reality rather, preferring facts and evidence to find out what's going on. Then with the steadiness profile, there's a focus on service or support. They like to maintain the status quo and provide that support for others. If that is not their focus, they prefer to seek variety, so more multitasking, faster pace of work. Then last, we have compliance. So this is a strong focus on quality and standards in someone's profile, using policy to be as accurate as possible. If that's not someone's focus, they rather seek autonomy, want to be more independent, not be constrained by the rules. So these 4 aspects can combine as well, and we can all show different aspects at different times, but we have clear preferences, and that's going to come through in the workplace and what you're going to be enjoying doing, that person job fit we talked about, the unused resources, and the effective aspects of the job. So we're going to look at an example candidate versus the job profile we discussed. So in the job profile report, you get all this information and a lot more, including questions to ask. So the candidate we have here, we've compared to the job profile. So you'll see the report or the graph on the left, that is the candidate, and then the graph on the next to it on the right is the job profile. So the computer and the system compares the two to see, okay, what is the match from 1 to 5? What's going on there? And you can see this candidate has a star rating of 2 stars, okay? Then they also tap into, so what does that mean? What are the commonalities? Where are the personal strengths? And what might be some of the limitations based on the differences compared to what the role is requiring? This allows you to see, can I manage these limitations? Can I provide that support? Or is this something that might have a bigger impact down the line? So here we can see the individual has a strong focus on influence, steadiness, and compliance, whereas the job profile has a stronger focus on compliance, influence, and dominance. So there's 2 aspects there, the steadiness and dominance, that might not be quite the same. So some of the personal strengths would be that both the individual as well as the job profile focus on these aspects: improving and maintaining standards, resolving problems with practical solutions, researching factual information, applying logic to problem solving and handling conflict, gathering factual information to assist in achieving goals, leading, training, supporting others, and building morale and personal esteem with others as well. But there are some limitations because of those differences. They may not necessarily have the same self-starting ability that the role requires. So when it comes to pushing themselves and others to achieve results, there may be a mismatch there. They may not push as hard as the role requires. They may not take clear objectives or take control of situations and monitor the performance of others. So this candidate prefers to rather motivate, rather chat, rather support, not necessarily direct that behavior, which is what the role is requiring. They also may be a bit more reactive than proactive compared to the role. They may fail to bring that sense of urgency to push for that result, or maybe even beat timescales, which the role might need. Okay. So there we can see the different matches then. It's really important to be able to look at that to see, do I have the resources to support this individual? If we are going to develop them, let's look at the other assessments to see how can we develop them then to get to that point. Okay. Then we move on to the aptitude and ability. So we've seen, okay, we've got all the previous experience, the knowledge, the skills. We know that what the behavioral fit is, but what is the ability that they're bringing with that? How are we going to really see that coming across? This is where the GIA comes in. So the GIA is the General Intelligence Assessment. It's an aptitude and ability assessment that has the 5 different subtests, namely reasoning, perceptual speed, number speed and accuracy, word meaning, and spatial visualization. I will take you through them a bit more. Then that overall score in the middle indicates a response to training and changing work environments. So it really allows us to look at what's the candidate's learning speed, how quickly are they going to pick up certain things in certain situations, which can be very important. Now, there's no good or bad results specifically, but the context is going to play into what you're looking for here. So certain roles may be more suited to a high aptitude, and some may be more suited to a low aptitude. Natasha, could you tell us, how do you decide on what subtests of the GIA are important for a specific role that you're recruiting for?
Okay, so we really do take a process with the direct line manager for that person that we are recruiting for, and we have a discussion with regards to this assessment and also the different aspects that we can measure with that. And we also make use of our job profile and our job advertisement. So for example, with the senior learning designer position that we have, this candidate really will get a lot of information. They will get information from lecturers, and then they need to design it. They need to put it on the online platform. So we really have a discussion with regards to what will be expected of that candidate. So for this position, we looked at reasoning ability. We looked at how accurate the perceptual speed test, so their ability to ignore irrelevant information, identify similarities, and this person also needed to design, they need to take that data, that information that they get from a lecturer, and they need to design it in such a way on the online platform for students in order to engage. So for that, we also looked at, for example, the spatial visualization. So to see whether they will be able to make this information that the students need to see, whether they will be able to interpret it, whether they would be able to put it in diagrams, how will they visualize that type of information. So it's really about having that discussion with that line manager, understanding what will be required from this person, the successful candidate. And also when we do have this discussion on what we will give feedback on, we also really ask them, what could be trained, what cannot be trained, what's really essential for this position. And with that, we make the recommendations to say that this is the assessment, or this is the subtest that we're going to report on, and this is the typical information that they then will get based on that results.
Awesome, Natasha. Thank you so much. And I love what you really tapped into there, is not just saying we want one specific thing no matter what, but really looking at what is the context and what's really important here. And that's the process you need to take as well with the line manager that you're working with that whole recruitment team, to understand what are we looking at here, because it's going to give you really valuable insights as well. So I'm going to take you through very quickly the example candidates GIA, not going too in depth because Natasha gives such an awesome explanation there, but to maybe ask or give you some insight into the kind of questions you could ask yourself as well as your recruitment team there. So for example, if we're looking at this example candidates GIA and we look at that overall score, which tells us their general trainability, here we have to look at this specific question. Does the candidate need to work with information that is completely new to them on a regular basis? Now, some roles don't need that. So some roles actually are quite routine. You want someone that's not going to leave soon because you want someone that feels very comfortable with that. Some roles need a lot more. They need to be really adaptable to brand new information. So this is the question we need to ask. And here we can see with this candidate above average, they're likely going to pick up those new skills and abilities quickly and respond to that changing environment quicker than most. When it comes to this position, this could definitely be a benefit in terms of that trainability overall. Then if we look at the specific subtests as well. So if we look at reasoning, which is about that problem solving, the two questions we really need to ask ourselves here is, does the candidate need to think on their feet? And do they have to deal with a lot of new problems? Because that's how we see, is this necessary for the role? Now we saw, and what Natasha mentioned to us now, it is important for this role. So what we can see with this candidate is in the below average range, they may find it difficult to problem solve while holding information in their short-term memory. And this would have to be something where we'd have to see, how do we support them? So we know that overall trainability is there, but how are we going to support them when they have to work independently? Can we support them? Or is this something that is one of our must-haves, cannot live without? Then if we look at perceptual speed, which is what was mentioned as well, this is the questions we ask here is, does the candidate need to proofread documentation? Do they have to screen data for accuracies and errors? And here, what we mentioned with Natasha now, it is important. And here we can see in above average range, this individual will probably be quicker than most to spot the similarities and difference, recognize those errors and the relevant and irrelevant information. So there could be a fit. Then if we look at number speed and accuracy, we need to ask, does the candidate need to work with numbers? Do they have to think on their feet processing data without the use of spreadsheets and calculators? Is that something important? And then the average range just indicates a standard ability to analyze that numerical data. But if they don't really need to do that much, this might not be the deciding factor of the GIA that's going to help us reach our final conclusion. Then if we look at word meaning, this is about, does the candidate really need to be able to communicate to a broad range of people? Do they have to explain things in many different ways at work? Now, in this position, I think that could be very important as well. In the above average range, we can see they probably would find it easy to explain their ideas both verbally and in written format to a variety of people, which could really put them in good stead. And then lastly, when we look at spatial visualization, we need to ask, does the candidate need to work with charts and diagrams? Do they have to be able to turn visual concepts into a reality for people? And in the high range, this kind of fits with what Natasha was looking for, where we do want that spatial visualization. So high indicates that they'll likely be extremely suited to design work, mechanical reasoning, or have that very good mental visualization, being able to put it into charts, into graphs, make it visually stimulating. Okay, so here you can see the context is very important. We don't just want someone to be at the top or the bottom. We're looking at what's really important for this role. So that's the GIA. Then lastly, we'll also look at the personality. So especially when you get into more senior roles, personality is very important. And this cannot be said anymore for the high potential trait indicator as well. So the high potential trait indicator, is an assessment that establishes how the candidate will approach their work. It identifies their strengths and derailers and their leadership potential as well. So it really helps us to understand how do we look at that leadership potential. It really can be important when recruiting graduates and people that you want to put into succession planning as well. So the HPTI has 6 key traits that you can see on the page here, and I'll explain a little bit more. So you've also got different zones that they can fall within. So traits which fall within the optimal zones indicate a very strong leadership potential. It's that sweet spot that we're looking for most leadership positions. Traits which fall into the low or moderate range may need development, and traits which fall into the excessive range may have possible derailers. But the context is more important there. And then we can look at, is this really, again, one of those must-haves, or is this something that we can be a bit more flexible with? So when we look at these different scores of a candidate, like in the example candidates HPTI, we need to again look at certain questions to help guide us. Is this important? To not just think everything's important, make it a very effective process. So with conscientiousness, what we're looking at here is how highly disciplined and self-driven does this candidate need to be? Now, if they're in the optimal zone, like this candidate is, it indicates that they will likely make concrete plans, motivate themselves to work, and seem driven to achieve goals. So if this is important for the role, this can be very important. This would be a deciding factor as well. You can see it's a match here. For this role, some of the things they mentioned was working quickly and accurately. Another thing they mentioned in the role was also looking at working in a team as well as independently. So the self-motivation is there, which guides us to think this would be quite important for the role. If we look at adjustment, the question we need to ask here is how much stress and pressure will there be in the role? So optimal indicates they'll likely feel positive about their own work and relationships and probably will shrug off stress. Now, if there's a high element of stress in this role, this can be very useful because they will also show the calm persona to the people in their team. With curiosity, we need to ask, does this candidate need to be open to innovation, change, new information methods and approaches? And I think we can agree they definitely do. That's part of being able to learn, develop new learning styles as well, or learning methods in university. So optimal indicates that they'll likely search for new information and alternative methods of getting work done, but not so much so that the whole university can follow them. That's why it's in the optimal zone. And that would be quite an advantageous trait for this candidate. Then if we look at something like risk approach, this asks us, will they have to deal with these challenging, difficult, or threatening situations, a lot of conflict? If they do, we might want a higher score. But if that is not as much a part of the role, if they're not going to be dealing with a lot of conflict, then the moderate could work in the sense that they'll probably take risks, but be very calculated the way they take risks. And if this role allows for that, that can be a good fit. Again, that's where the context becomes more important. Then with ambiguity acceptance, the question we need to ask here is, does the candidate have to cope with complex and contradictory information? And here we can see that they'll probably accept complex, unclear situations, but they prefer stability and structure. If you think about a university, there's a lot of structure that you have to keep in mind. So this could be a good fit as well. Then lastly, with competitiveness, we need to look at, does this candidate have to compete with others for achievements, power, or rewards? If it is a very collaborative environment, then moderate will suit just fine. This individual will prefer to be part of a successful team than be recognized as the most successful person on a team. However, if you're looking at maybe something like varsity college, which is very competitive because it's more of a private business model, then maybe you would want a higher competitiveness, for example. So that shows you how the context can really play a role there. Then after you've looked at all that information, it's time to make a decision. So because you've already incorporated the assessments into the correct stage of the process, you've provided an excellent candidate experience and you've gotten great information for the next round of interviews. Let's say if this person isn't successful. So it's a win-win either way. So the whole experience is tailored to ensure that you make the right decision for your organization and mitigate those unwanted costs. And that's where we come through with the assessments and selection. So then we have to appoint the person. So now we're getting to the other stages of our model that we discussed in the beginning. So appointing the right person quickly is important. Once you've identified that you found the right person, that offer needs to be made as soon as possible. So 31% of recruiters believe that headcount challenges are related to protracted hiring processes, and 47% of declined offers were due to candidates receiving alternative job offers. So getting in there once you've made the decision is extremely important, because then that person can be on your team, making sure that they know that they're wanted, and they're going to probably go with your organization rather. Then we get into induction to the role, team, and culture, and this is where we start looking at onboarding. So Natasha, do you only use assessments for recruitment, or does it also form part of your onboarding and development process?
Yes, so we use assessment, as I mentioned, throughout the whole employee life cycle. So for the successful candidates, we compile an individual development plan based on the assessments that we've done. And we also provide the line manager and themselves with the onboarder questionnaire. And then we use it for, like, for example, job gradings. If you want to get promoted or your name is up for promotion, then we assess you to see whether you will be able to function or perform on that level that you're moving towards, as well as with a development plan. And then we use it for performance issues. We use it for personal development throughout your stay at the university. Yeah, so we actually make use of it for a whole lot of purposes during their stay at the university.
Thanks, Natasha. And I think this really shows you how it shouldn't just stop at appointing the person. We need to take it further so that, again, you're getting the best value out of what you've put effort into already. So induction into the role, as well as the people, team, and culture, is very important, like we've mentioned. So you've amassed this wealth of data information on the person. Why not use it to support the new starter in feeling more comfortable as they join your business and helping them find their feet quickly? Okay. So another aspect that we need to look at is also, do we give feedback on people's results to the successful candidates? And what Natasha's mentioned now is that definitely does happen. So the ways that we can bring this into induction will be through personal assessment feedback, onboarding reports, team audits, just to mention a few. There's a lot more you can do, but for the interest of time, these are the key ones that we can look at already. So if you look at personal feedback, that will just improve the self-awareness in general, so the person feels that you've actually given them feedback. But you can tailor it through using things like the PPA onboarding report. So this report assists in the onboarding process by providing information on how you maximize the potential of the individual by focusing on strength and possible development areas as well. So it allows you to see can you expect, the personal styles, where they really should be responsible for certain things, how you approach them in terms of management, and considerations for their future in the organization, which looks at managing potential or maximizing it, as well as development. That can be really useful. But we can also use the PPA in a team setting as well. So you have your candidate's PPA, why not include into the team's results? So the team audit provides you with that comprehensive report and allows you to answer questions such as, what role is this person going to play in this team that's already existing there? Are we playing to the strengths of each team member? Is there a conflict that could occur? Should we work on that self-awareness from the get-go? And how can I better lead these individuals based on their team profile? So other aspects that come through, if you really add more personal feedback on the assessments, not just the PPA, is they receive really important insights into their profile and are able to grow through that self-awareness. And they feel a sense of personal investment from your company. Again, that can really be useful. Then to take it further, at Thomas, we believe that owning your profile allows others to understand us better and to work more as a more effective team. And this can be done in something like an email banner. So in this email banner, this is mine personally, you can see what my team roles are, what my GIA looks like, what my TIKI looks like, which is an emotional intelligence assessment, and what PPA factors I find very important in my profile. So it just shows you this is quite useful as well. We can also own our profile as a team. So you can use posters to remind people of their strengths and differences. So these posters look at the value that an individual brings, the basic fears, the motivators, the communication style. And if that's around your office already, we're getting a language that we speak with one another based on being open with our assessments. Another poster here looks at DISC and teamwork. So it shows you what does each person bring to the team and can foster a bit more of a commonality between individuals as well. So you can see assessments can form a really vital part through this whole process, through this case study that we worked through today. That's it from me. Now let's move on to the questions and comments. Larissa?
Thank you, Kira. That was very insightful. So we have a few questions for you today. The first one is, if I am recruiting for a brand new position where I have a fair idea of what is required, but I am not 100% certain, how do I make sure I am recruiting the right person where I do not necessarily have a clear job description?
That's a really valuable question. I think there we need to really look at, in terms of that job, let's do some research around it. Let's look at what our industry competitors' jobs look like. Let's maybe look through some of the competencies that we have developed as an organization, like Natasha mentioned, with their competency framework. How does it fit in there? Let's also ask the relevant people in the departments as well. So it shouldn't just be up to the practitioner to decide a job role. Natasha mentioned earlier, it's important to also look at the people that are going to be working with them as well. Focusing on the tasks, trying to see, okay, these tasks relate to these elements, and use that to help you make the job profile. Larissa, is there anything that you would like to add there?
No, I think that's perfect. And then the other question we have is, should I share the PPA onboarding report with the candidate as well?
It would be a really awesome opportunity to have a good feedback session if you do. So don't just share it with no feedback. It's better to have the discussion, but have a discussion where you sit with that onboarding report and say, this is what our results say. Have an open feedback session that allows people to chat to one another, get to know each other. You can even do compatibility reports with that, so they can see, oh, this is what you as a manager look like in terms of the PPA. And then we can see, oh, you're just as vulnerable as I am. Let's talk about this. Let's be open and care about what our assessment results say. Another report that you can share as well. Sorry, Larissa. Another report that you can share as well, if you don't have necessarily a lot of time to give feedback in the beginning, so you can share the candidate feedback reports, because it doesn't need any explanation with it. It's very clear and precise and straight to the point, which is quite nice. And there's also the managing remote workers report that you can go through with the candidate as well, especially if you're doing remote onboarding. That can be really useful to help you understand in this different landscape how to work with that candidate. Sorry, Larissa, for interrupting you there.
No problem. No, I just wanted to add, we have the compatibility report, but you can also even generate a team report. So with the team report, you're able to see what the team is lacking, where the strengths are, where the limitations are, and also what role each person plays within that team. And if there's something specific that's lacking, then you know to look for that quality or for that specific behavioral style within the candidate that you're recruiting. And it just allows for so much more diversity and utilizing different strengths from different people.
100%, okay. Totally agree with that.
Perfect. And then we have another question. If your budget is limited, which assessments would be better to include in your battery?
This is very tricky, because in a perfect world, we wouldn't be having any limits on these assessments. But I think the PPA is a very good point to start. So if you can even start just with the PPA, it gives you good insights, and it's a way to already induct the person to the culture if that's what you're using currently. So with the PPA, because you can get so many reports out of this one assessment as well, it really helps you to understand how to manage the individual, motivate them, how to develop them. You can even get a specific sales audit report. You can get reports specific to customer service. So that's the one where I think you could get so much value out of just that one assessment. So if you have a very limited budget, that could be very important as well to then focus on PPA.
Perfect. And then we just have a comment from Natasha. So the UFS makes use for Thomas assessments, for example, how to reward our employees, how they deal with change, so culture and engagement. So she just forgot to mention that. Thank you, Natasha, for adding that bit in. Kira, do you want to add anything to that aspect?
No, I think that's awesome, Natasha. And I think it's really nice to get that practical example from you there as well. I see we just have one last question. Hey.
Yeah, it's a question for Natasha, actually. So Natasha, how do you handle feedback with line managers who don't necessarily see the value from assessments?
So, yeah, that is quite a difficult one, especially within the university culture. And as I've mentioned, we've only started using the psychometric assessments from 2015. So what we really are trying to do now is really to first of all, we sometimes make use of the data. So we will give them, for example, like that statistics that we use at the beginning, just to show them the value of the assessments. And then when we give feedback, we try not to box a candidate. So we really link it with the job profile, and we try to link it with what they see the perfect or the most successful candidate would be like. So I think we are trying to craft our way of giving the feedback and selling psychometrics to our line managers and the interview panel so that they can actually see the value. And like I've mentioned, we are working with Thomas UK and Caitlin with regards to giving them more data, let's say looking at performance management and looking at specific behavioral preferences for specific positions so that we can actually show them the return of the investment of doing the assessment. So it's quite a journey that we are currently on with our employees back at the university, but I think slowly but surely we are getting there, and word of mouth and the type of feedback are assisting us at the moment to get there by and so that they can appreciate what we are doing as well.
Awesome, Natasha. I really like what you mentioned there. And that's something can be very useful if you do elements like benchmarking to see, okay, what does successful really look like for us? So using the stats that we can help you with as well. But also then we can do studies or stats with you as well, where we can correlate how are these people performing based on the results to show you that return on investment as well. So really awesome aspect that you mentioned there, Natasha.
Yes, and normally we link it back to what they observed during the interviews. I think then they really get that, so yes, we observed that during the interviews, and something that I'm seeing is that they really want to do it themselves now. So we are really starting to get that culture so that they can value psychometric assessments.
Awesome. I love to hear that. Okay, any more questions, Larissa?
No, that's it for today. Thank you, Kira.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for attending. Our next session next week is for recruiting for sales, a practical applications. That's on the 18th of August. As Larissa did mention, there will be a survey being sent out to you so we can get some valuable feedback to see how can we be better, how can we give you more value out of these sessions as well. Larissa, is there anything else I need to mention about that survey?
No, we just appreciate if you complete it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day further.